Oi, what's the best game where you get to eat pie? What's the best game where you play a dead guy? You'll find out in VG247's podcast. Here, what's the best game where you swing from a rope? And what's the best game where you batter the Pope? Like I said, you will find out in this here podcast. Hello and welcome to VG247's Best Games Ever podcast, where we attempt to find the best game within an extremely specific category that we've made up for SEO purposes. Probably, I don't know what that means. For example, this week we're looking for the best game that crashed at the worst possible time. Now, it's annoying when games crash. It's happened to all of us, but video games as pieces of software are difficult to understand and impossible to work with, so much so that it's frankly a miracle that they function at all, much like the team that beats impossible odds every day to bring you VG247. And I'm joined by some of them now. Hello, everyone. Hello. We're all up against it this week because Pokemon's happening and various other stuff. So we figured that we're going to try and knock this one out in 20 minutes just to see if that's even possible. We're going to do a streamlined Best Games Ever podcast for you this week, and it's
going to end up being 50 minutes long.
It'll be an hour. I'm going to absolutely.
We're doing it live. Donaldson's going to just talk about a JRPG for 25 minutes.
I mean, probably maybe Pokemon.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, speaking of Donaldson, let's go with you first. And we just want to point out to the listeners as well that your camera setup is all wrecked at the moment. So what we're receiving from Donaldson's webcam feed is not a picture of Donaldson. It is a live feed of the new Pokemon game.
This is technically a breach of embargo until tomorrow. That I'm showing you this.
Well, they can't see it. It's only a breach of embargo in like my house.
What's really weird is because this is technically showing it as a webcam. It's all reversed, so my controls are reversed. Like right is left and left is right.
You should do a video where you try and complete it like that.
The funny thing is, what Tom said, I actually did think about. Picking a Pokemon game. There I am in Pokemon 4.
Oh, lovely.
But because I had a story about corrupting a Pokemon Blue save by accidentally stumbling into one of those missing no bugs and ruining my save. I also thought about it's not technically in this category, but the very first thing I thought about when I read this category, and then I was like, it doesn't really count. But I want to talk about it briefly because I think it's so cool. There's that X-Men game on Mega Drive where you reach a certain point right towards the end of the game and you come across a computer and the computer says reset the computer on it. And people would feel like the game had soft locked because you'd be standing in front of this machine that said reset the computer and nothing would happen. And you'd be 2-3 hours into this Streets of Rage style beat 'em up action game at this point. And you'd think, Christ, it's crashed, it's soft locked. I'm not able to progress. And what you actually had to do was physically reset the Mega Drive.
That's insane.
And that would trigger the thing. It would reload, and it wouldn't reload from the start of the game. It would drop you in right where you left off, and you would be able to continue.
And that, of course, is what inspired Metal Gear Solid.
Is it really?
No, I'm making it up as a joke.
You never fucking know with Kojima, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, it could be that he played that. I'm amazed that, because people talk about it quite a lot in the retro nerd parlance, but it's one of those things that's never really been used. Very much this idea of interfering with the console in order to progress in the game, although Kojima's done a few things like that, right?
Yeah, he has, yeah.
Anyway, so my actual pick is Dead Rising. I've picked Dead Rising before on this podcast. I've talked about how it's one of my favourite games ever. All still true.
I think you're the only person I know who loves Dead Rising. I've never known anyone.
There's a very dedicated fan base. There's a lot of us. There's
dozens of us.
But the original Dead Rising has a mode. I don't know if this is overtime. Overtime mode, I think, is the one that leads to the true ending. But there's another mode where there was an achievement for it. Might just be called Infinite Mode, and there's an achievement basically for surviving in the mall. But the gimmick for that mode is that Frank West's health constantly depletes, and in that mode, food and stuff doesn't respawn. So basically, in order to survive as long as you can, you need to have this laser memory of the mall. Remember where you've been, remember what bosses you've defeated, all that sort of stuff. And it can go on forever. Obviously, there's a finite end in the end because you will just eventually run out of food. This is the version where there isn't an ending, there isn't an escape. That's for the true version of the game. This is just sort of like a bonus that unlocks at the end. But basically, there was an achievement that was for surviving a certain amount of days in that mode, in infinite mode. I'm actually just very quickly looking it up now. So survive for at least 7 days.
Right, that makes sense.
7 in-game days, which I'm curious. I'm not quite sure how long that is in real-world time, but it was quite a while. And you couldn't pause or anything like that.
Wow.
And, it was brutal. And basically, the long story short is, so 2 hours is 1 day. So
wow, okay.
So you're talking playing the game untouched for 14 hours. Maybe you could pause, but it was definitely very brutal. It was a really difficult achievement. I'm looking at it now on True Achievements. Like, shout out to the guys there. They're a really good website and they're good buds of mine. And looking there, they've got that like API thing where they track Xbox achievements. Only like 3% of players of Dead Rising have got that achievement.
Yeah.
And where this is going. I got like 5.5, 6 days in. I was feeling really good about it. This was on a regular 360, like a regular white premium model from launch, and it crashed. And because I don't know if there's a pause, but there's definitely no save in this mode. So even if you can pause it and walk away and go for a poo or whatever. which would be needed, because otherwise you'd be doing like a Cartman in that South Park episode,
right? Where
you just like where you're shouting for your mum or your partner to come and put the bucket in. So you probably can pause it, but you definitely 100% you cannot save it. And so basically I was screwed and I lost all my progress. I'd got the achievement for 5 days and I never did in my life get the achievement for 7 days because I couldn't bring myself to attempt it again.
After an upset like that, you just would never do it, would you? You're just like, well, I'm not risking that again.
Even when it was remastered and I went and like 100%ed every other aspect of the game on Steam, I didn't go back and do this because the memory is too traumatic. And what was it? Like the real kicker is this denied me. The unlock for this was the Mega Man arm cannon, the Mega Buster, as a weapon for Frank West. That was what you unlocked by completing it. And so I was like 2.5 hours from having that. And the shitty Xbox denied that for me. And I think that Xbox did Red Ring of Death not shortly after that.
So he was probably teetering on the edge of a red ring, you reckon?
Probably. And Dead Rising was quite on the original 360 version, Dead Rising was quite a crashy game anyway. It's like, obviously people now think of it and they've played it on PC, or there was the remastered version for the modern consoles. And people think of that version, but it was like this technical tour de force on 360, and even on later 360s, on the later models that were stable, I think this was a game that was a little bit prone to a crash every now and then, unfortunately.
But you were always playing roulette with those launch model 360s. I remember. I think if I was on the panel for this, I would probably go for what's that game? Stranglehold, the sequel to Hard Boiled. I think that game triggered a lot of red rings. But I remember I was on the last level of that and I'd nearly finished it, and it was I think it was my 9th attempt to get through it. And the console red ringed when I was mid-jump. And that was it. That was it.
I'm laughing because I'm looking at this guide for achievements for this achievement. And it even says, it's like a day-by-day guide. Literally like day 3, spend all days at one specific point gather food, and then just stand in one place where you're safe from the zombies. But then day 4, it literally says, warning, do not enter or leave the food court between 4 a.m. and 4:24 a.m. or the game will freeze on the loaded screen. This is a known bug.
Incredible.
So, yeah, it was one of those. And it's such a shame because it's such a cool challenge as well. And I'm scarred from that. And this was when I was a real achievement hound as well.
You'll never do. I mean, what if we try and stream it over Christmas?
Oh, it's tempting. It's tempting. I think part of the problem is that Dead Rising requires or this challenge of Dead Rising requires
doesn't require Connect or something, does it?
No, but it requires a level of knowledge of the game and where stuff is in the game.
Yeah, and it's just faded away now.
And strategies for the bosses, because the story bosses, obviously there's no story in this mode, but they just spawn into the world at different places at set times.
Irritating.
But you can't afford to lose health through taking damage because you need it all for the timer. So you have to be extremely proficient at killing the bosses without taking any damage, stuff like that. It would be such a hard challenge. I think a fun challenge would be someone trying to do the full overtime mode, Dead Rising, in one sitting. I've seen someone attempt that before on Twitch, and it was entertaining because you do one thing wrong and the game's clock undoes you.
I thought you were going to say, so I don't know why this popped into my head, but I thought you were going to say it requires Connect to do that mode because it would know if you'd gone for a poo and then would deplete your health while you were away or something evil.
It's a few years early for that, but I tell you, there's probably a feature in us going back and looking at games that had completely unnecessary Connect integration and how good it was. The one that I always think of, or how bad it was, because the one that I always think of is Mass Effect 3 had Connect, didn't it? And so you could read out the dialogue responses.
Yeah, you'd read out the dialogue response, and then Shepard would say it. So you've said it twice and then a lot of rubbish.
And it would never recognise my Brummie accent anyway. So.
You don't know. I think the audience is getting a bit bored of Dead Rising.
We said we were going to bosh it out in 20 minutes, and then it's 15 minutes later.
I was going to say, okay, well, let's have a look. Tom, you've got 4 minutes.
4 minutes
for your one. Yeah.
I don't need to waffle on endlessly about it. So my choice is an original Xbox game, which I reviewed. I looked back and I reviewed this game 17 years ago, which is somewhat shocking. But MechAssault 2 Lone Wolf, which I'm going to get out right in front of this and say, in my mind, this is a better game than what I obviously thought it was. So probably going to lose. Gave it a 6 out of 10.
6 out of 10 was the best score on Video Gamer, though.
The review is not high of praise. But anyway, the crash moment, right? So I was reviewing this, and I can't remember, but let's assume I was
was this when you were all living in the one big house in Croydon?
This was pre that. This is when I was at university still.
All right, okay.
I think. So I was in the university house playing this game, and I was on the final boss, and it was one of those annoying, let's make the final boss ridiculously hard situations for no real reason other than to try and make you feel good about beating it, even though it makes no sense to make the final boss almost unbeatable. But anyway, I beat the final boss. Well, I thought I was beating the final boss. I made a blow with my mech to defeat it, and the game crashed. I was like, this is annoying. Did it again, crashed again, right? Did it again, crashed again. And I was like, that's it. Never going to finish this game. I mentioned it to the PR and everything else. They did an update, I think, before it was actually out to say, to fix it, because this was pre-release stuff. But yeah, that was it. MechAssault 2, Lone Wolf, 6 out of 10 game. That did crash a lot.
Sounds like a best game to me.
I mean, in my mind, MechAssault, in my mind, is a really good game, particularly because of Xbox Live. And this had some good Xbox Live stuff as well, right? Back then, Xbox was really hot and way ahead of everyone else in terms of online stuff. It still is in some ways.
Yeah, definitely still is.
And this is a game that, in my mind, it's quite blended with the fun I had with MechAssault online, early days of Xbox. So that's why I went to it immediately without really realising that I ripped it apart a lot in the review and said it was pretty bad in a lot of ways.
And shall we read some choice quotes from this review? It
caused me some headache at the time, and some people probably think fondly of it. I bet the Metacritic's higher than what I said. If it is on Metacritic, I don't know.
Well, let's hear what Tom Orry thought of MechAssault 2.
Yeah, I bet it's on like at least 68.
Have you got the review up, James? Is this where it's going?
I can see here. Let's see what Tom Orry thought about it.
There we go.
He said
it's a good game. Good.
He said that the story of MechAssault 2 is told in a poor way, with poor cutscenes and some poor acting.
Obviously, that crash influenced me more than I thought.
Well, I think, did you just give it a 6 out of 10 because it crashed? And I mean, presumably it crashed for every reviewer then, if they had to issue an update.
I don't know if it did. I think they told me it had an update, but I haven't really seen many people talking about it at the time. I mean, maybe it's just my Xbox is just broken.
Would be. I mean, are all these because we had dodgy Xboxes? Is that what's going on?
Can I just, before we go on, I feel like I haven't really said enough of value, so I want to just add a little story about what happened to me this morning for the listeners.
You got 45 seconds.
Right, so on the way, I took my son to school this morning, right, before work.
Yeah.
Walked him in as normal. At home, my wife's at home with my daughter, so we left and said goodbye, etc. Then on the way home, I heard this shouting. I was like, what is that shouting? So I looked behind me and couldn't see anything going on, right? Nothing there at all. Just carried on. Walking at pace up a hill to get home for 9 easily for the embargo for Pokemon in case everyone else was not around for some reason, in case it needed to be pushed, a button needed to be pressed. Didn't it need to be done, but whatever. I was walking at pace and I heard more shouting. I was like, what is this? What's going on? Is there like an incident? Nothing. I looked around, couldn't see anything. I carried on. At this point, I was just about to turn down my road about 10 minutes after I left the school. And I turned back because there was more shouting. And I saw a woman and she was waving. She had a buggy and she was waving her hands in the air to like gesture to me. And I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And I looked closer and it was my wife and daughter. Right? So they'd been shouting at me for 10 minutes pretty much. Every now and again, like, Tom, and like shouting quite a lot. I was just completely blanking them and looking at them every time, and then carrying walking on, just ignoring them completely. And even this last time when I looked at them, I carried on walking for a second, and then I realised I don't know what's going on. Like my brain just did not process the fact that was them, because I thought they were at home. So my brain was like, no, nobody has any reason to talk to me.
What a lovely story. And just, I love that we've done an aside there about the time Tom ignored his wife.
I mean, I'm
just like that bit in Uncharted 4.
I feel bad about it, but what can I do? Like, I wasn't expecting them to be there. The worst part was my daughter was very upset because she kept thinking I was going to go and say hello, and I kept ignoring them and walking on.
You see, if they'd ever sort of watched like your video stuff or listened to podcasts you've been on, they would just have assumed that you were doing a bit, a classic Tom Orry bit.
I know, but I wasn't. I was just
I
was in a zone, and my zone was get home as quickly as possible for content purposes.
If they were familiar with your content, they would have been like, he's doing what he did on the Football Manager video where he ate a sandwich. Yeah. All right. James, what have you got for us?
Hello, by the way. Just chucking it out there that you didn't see fit to introduce me.
Has he been here the whole time? Maybe he's not been around. It's just some random noises coming from his feed.
His video drops out, but there is noises coming from his feed.
Are you there?
Can you not hear me?
God, it's just like that film Host.
Can you actually not hear me?
Can you not hear James? Can you not hear James?
I can't.
No wonder. So I've been talking. That's why they weren't giving me anything.
I was going to say, because I did every time because James like read bits from your review that you wrote 17 years ago,
and
you just blanked him and talked over him, and I thought, all right, okay, okay.
I thought he was just having a moment to himself, just a bit of peace.
Me and Jim were chipping in. I was doing some absolute gold on Mech Warrior 2.
Yeah.
I was taking you to task, and you were just like absolutely nothing. I was like, this absolute disrespect.
Yeah.
I mean, leave it in the edit, but I mean, it's just be funny.
I mean, you were like, James was trying to like give you gold, as he says, and you just completely blanked him, talked over him, and I thought, Jesus. And then you immediately launched into that story about how you ignored your wife for 10 minutes. So I thought, I guess he's just in that sort of mood.
Man, it was cold. I'm sat here like stewing, like feeling, oh my God, I've just been.
Well, it's all right. It's all right. You knew it was a mistake now. So, James, what is it you've got for us? What game crashed at a very inopportune moment for you?
Well, hello, by the way. Seeing as at the start of the podcast, Jim, you didn't see fit to introduce me.
Or me, or
I didn't
Alex.
didn't introduce myself either. It's egalitarian. Everyone's getting mugged off.
It's been 4 disembodied voices talking for the last 20 minutes.
Donaldson hasn't even bothered putting his camera on because he had to unplug a cable or something.
But yeah, speaking of ignoring your wife, my wife has become a fan of the stylings of Tom Orry and Co. on this podcast.
Okay.
And to the point where she's decided to start trying to workshop my choices with me before. So I was sat down at the kitchen. When I told her I was going to be on, I was sat down at the kitchen table and I told her what I was going to pick. And she was like, no, you can't have that. And I was like, why? It's one of my favorite games. I really like it. No, it's like Taskmaster. Jim doesn't go for doing the actual tasks. He goes for the emotional stories.
That's why I told my story about my wife. I know it's not related, but
that is a true story. I'm not just doing it for effect.
I feel incredibly sussed out.
But yeah, so on that advice, I've thrown out my previous choice, which was a bit of a novel take on the.
What was it? Just run it by us quickly.
Well, it was quickly. I was going to sort of say, I was thinking, something that crashed. Maybe I should do a game that came out and flopped because it was bad or whatever.
I'd have ripped into that.
Yeah, so I was going to pick Deus Ex: Mankind Divided because it came out and crashed and just destroyed the whole series.
Just to add a little bit of background, James messaged me yesterday saying he was thinking about either Deus Ex: Mankind Divided or Cyberpunk 2077 on the grounds they almost crashed the Polish stock market, which also would have been a good one. So
so I had a lot of ammunition for this one, and I decided on against my better judgment. So I know where to put the blame if it fails. But I've gone for one of my absolute favorite games from my teenage years, the Mos Eisley of the internet, the absolute den of scum and villainy that is the classic browser-based MMO by the great British MMO, Runescape. And obviously Runescape has a bad reputation because a lot of people played it for 5 minutes in their school computer lab or whatever and bounced off it just thinking it was some kind of kiddie rubbish or whatever. But if you play it properly and actually play it as a game, it is a surprisingly incredibly deep and lore-filled kind of world with just a huge amount of great quests and storylines and different factions and races. And I really think that genuinely, even though it is one of the games that I feel I am nostalgic for, I feel that it makes almost perfect use of the limited game sort of gameplay mechanics that it does have, because it is a browser-based MMO at the end of the day. But it's a huge world with so many diverse areas, and I enjoy the quest where you can go to the Monkey Island. I really like the Monkey Island; it's really good.
Has it got anything to do with Monkey Island?
Maybe it does. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. But yeah, the reason that I call it the Mos Eisley of the internet is that it is an absolutely notorious school of hard knocks that's just full of scams, phishing, hacking, and what they used to call luring. So I don't know if this is specific to RuneScape, but in the north of the map, there's just a huge player killing area, PvP area called the Wilderness. And luring was the practice where people would basically trick dumb children into jumping into this PvP area and steal all of our items, because when you die in RuneScape, it is I think it came out in like 2000 or 2001 originally, so it's some aspects of it are quite brutal and quite rudimentary from a slightly earlier age of gaming. So whenever you die, you literally drop all of your items on the floor, and then you are chucked back to the starting area with nothing, or just a couple of things that you had in your pocket or whatever. As you can see, the stakes are pretty high for when things go wrong. I really, really loved RuneScape when I was a teenager, because the quests and the character you could build up was a really awesome basis for some really fun role play. And on these quests, sometimes you could create specific items, and there's a lot of street cred that you can get by having rare and not necessarily valuable, just cool looking things, because it is quite a childish experience in some ways. So if you have like a massive sword, you just like you are the Don, you're the big boy knocking about. And in an early quest, one of the things that you could craft was called Blurite Sword, which was just this like huge blue and white thing.
The Blairite, did you say?
Yeah, Blairite sword.
Well,
to cut through the catcherites, you need a Blairite sword. You need to fight neoliberalism with neoliberalism. And yeah, so during this quest, I managed to craft 2. But the kicker here is that with quest items, once the quest's finished, you can't go back and get them ever again. And everybody thought I was the bee's knees because I had this sword. They were like, "How have you got that?" I'd be walking around, people would be following me around and saying, "Where'd you get that? You're so cool. How did you get that?"
Lure a kid into a den.
Well,
sounds of it.
So let's cut a long story short. I lost the Blurite sword because the game crashed. I could never get it again. It was gone forever. I lost all of my street cred, and it was just a terrible experience. And really, that's put me in the position where I am today, where I have to come on this podcast and talk about just terrible games like Mech Warrior 2 or whatever it's called. I can't even remember what it's called. Lone Wolf?
What? It's completely Tom's.
Is he ignoring me? Or is this payback, or am I on mute?
No, I always ignore you, and therefore it should just be a given, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
How long did it take you to get the Blairite sword?
The Blairite sword, as it is now forever going to be known, probably. Well, because it's an MMO, isn't it? So it's probably literally days. It'll be because over the course of the few years that I played it, I played it for thousands and thousands of hours probably, because I'd come home and play it for sort of 6 hours every day after school for years. God. So it'll have been...
After school? How old were you?
Ages of sort of 11 to 15.
You don't play RuneScape if you're an adult unless you're on a list.
Yeah.
You're playing Pokemon on this video.
Yeah, we're getting actual live feed. It's not at first.
I tell you what, it's very distracting.
At first, Alex was just like streaming a feed of his character's face from the game, but then at some point during James's story, just started playing it.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done, right?
Yeah. We've been doing the world's weirdest Let's Play while we just talk about just completely unrelated stuff.
Just ignoring women. All right, so I've got to pick something now, so I'm going to play that jingle. I should probably redo that jingle, because there's nothing about that jingle that suggests it's wrap-up time. It's just...
No, I listened to that jingle for the first time the other day. I just wanted to check there was a jingle, because I've never listened back to any of these podcasts. And I thought, it could be improved.
Can you just replace it with the Trombone Champ X-Files theme tune? That was absolutely top-notch.
Nobody watched that video either. So, all right. I just want to check something. I'm just going to go around the three of you. How long did it take? So we've established with James, it's probably let's say 60 hours it took you to get the Blairite sword.
Very conservative. It'd be probably more than that. It'd probably be over 100.
About 100 hours.
Yeah.
All right, Tom. How far into the game were you when this started crashing?
Well, I'm going to say 101 hours.
No, can we? How long is? What's the name of the
Probably
game?
about 4 or 5 hours long. It's not very long.
Right. Okay. So 100 hours versus 5 hours, and
That's
Donaldson.
No, I don't like the way this is going.
It's like 5 days, 2 hours.
I was like.
Yeah,
that's like 10 hours in, but obviously you had to have completed everything else in Dead Rising in order to do that as well.
All right, how long did that take?
I want to say Dead Rising's maybe like a 25-hour game, probably.
Right,
for the main
okay.
story.
All right,
Can I just
James
chuck out
Lindsay.
there as well?
Yeah.
That, I could never get that ever again. That I'd completed the quest and therefore could never do it again.
So
That is quite an important point, I think he's made.
Donaldson, if you went mad and decided to do it again, if it took your fancy, you could make another attempt. You could make as many attempts as you like. Tom, I mean, the review was published and you gave it a kick in, so obviously it wasn't too much of a setback in your life. But James will never have the Blairite sword ever. It's gone.
It is RuneScape.
It's gone forever.
It's gone.
Done. But that's devastating for a child. I think he said he was about 5 or something. When, I can't remember. So I think because in 2 of these stories, I mean, like devastating crashes that got rid of a lot of progress. Very annoying. Tom ignored his wife. Can't remember how that came into it, but it was somehow involved.
It's a tragic story, isn't it?
It's a tragic story about the time Tom ignored his wife.
It could have crashed my marriage.
But James's story was like a harrowing tale of bitter childhood disappointment that's clearly stayed with him for decades.
You got to remember, this is the best game. As much as I really don't want Alex to win again, I really don't want that to happen. I'm accepting I'm out of this.
Dead Rising is a bad game, and I don't like it.
Dead
you
Rising.
yourself gave your game 6 out of 10.
I'm throwing.
Was that on Video Gamer as well?
Yeah,
it was.
Like a 6 out of 10 on Video Gamer is like a 3 out of 10 anywhere else.
I'm saying I'm out of this, right? But as someone who's now not in the game, I can, from a level-headed perspective, say RuneScape is shit, right?
Yeah.
So particularly original. I mean, original. Oh my god, how bad was it back then? Terrible. You had to be a child.
It was
a child
actually
who
very
knew nothing
good.
better.
It really made the most of the mechanics that it had.
And Izzy is right. I think, I guess I do go in for the more emotional kind of personal story that goes with the tale. And I'm just very taken by the tale of James being 4 years old and crying to whoever that
Did you cry? Did you cry afterwards? It's fine if you did. It's fine. I just want to know if that actually happened.
He was 2 years old and he just lost his Blairite sword in some kind of PvP arena that he had no business being in. So I'm going to assume that there was a lot of crying done.
Let's go with that.
Yeah. So I think RuneScape is the best. Oh, I don't like saying that. RuneScape is the most adequate game that crashed at the worst possible time for someone on the panel. There we go. It's going in.
Nice. I've now won with some real shit.
Isn't this like, Donaldson, is this like your third attempt to get Dead Rising in there?
Probably. It's one
I
of my
think you
favorite.
haven't you?
It's one of my favorite games, and it's so applicable. I've definitely done at least one of them.
Yeah.
It's so applicable to so many categories. It's such a great game.
Yeah.
I'm that guy who just says stop remaking Resident Evil, just make a new Dead Rising.
Yeah.
Cowards.
Yeah, it's just Resident Evil in a shop in it. Right, okay. All right, so let's all never talk about this again. We'll publish it tomorrow.
Let's do that.
Like I said, you will find out in this here podcast.
If you enjoyed the show, please give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. It really helps us get the word out. We're not just a podcast, of course. If you'd like to hear more from the team, then check out VG247.com for our fantastic news coverage, features, reviews, and game guides. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.